I want to explain to you a common misconception that comes up on the Taylor series homework. Here we have a Taylor series, and here I've written out the first 4 terms of this Taylor series. Now don't worry about this stuff down here just yet, I'll get to that in a moment. Now remember, how did we get this 1 there? We get that 1 by plugging n equals 0 into this formula. And similarly, we get negative 1/2 x cubed by plugging n equals 1 into this formula. And we get 1/3 x to the 6th by plugging n equals 2 into this formula. And similarly, this is the thing that we get, or the term that we get when we plug in n equals 3. So you could think of this as the n equals 0 term. This is the n equals 1 term. This is the n equals 2 term, and this is the n equals 3 term. All right, now notice that, in fact, this line right here is equal to this line. The only difference is I've given myself a little space in each of those spots there. And then also notice that this line is equal to this line. They're not exactly the same because in this line here, I have these things added in here. But notice that these are actually just 0, right? These are just a fancy way of writing 0. Plus 0, plus 0, plus 0. Adding zeros to things doesn't change the overall equality. So getting closer to the point, let's look at the general Taylor series centered at 0. All right, so this thing's going to look like a0 x to the 0 plus a1 x to the 1 plus a2 x to the 2, and going on forever and ever and ever like that. But the point here that I want to make is, look, a0 goes with x to the 0. a1 goes with x to the 1. a2 goes with x squared, or a2 goes with x to the 2. All right, so here's the common misconception. Even though this is the n equals 0 term, this is the n equals 1 term, this is the n equals 2 term, and this is the n equals 3 term. So even though this is the n equals 2 term, it's not the case that a2 equals 1/3. Right? This is not true. This is not true. Remember, a2 goes with x to the 2. And you can see that right here. So what goes with x to the 2? That's not true. What goes with, so a2 is the number that goes with x to the 2. So a2 is 0. So what is it that gives you 1/3? Right? This is the number that goes with x to the 6th. So this is A6. A6 is 1/3. So even though n equals 2 gives you 1/3 x to the 6th, that doesn't mean that A2 is 1/3. A2 is whatever goes with x squared. In this case, x squared has a 0 in front of it. So A2 is a 0. So what happens often for students is they write this out. They write this out and they go, and a question will say, well, what is A2? A2 equals what? And students will say, oh, well, let's see, when I plug in n equals 2, I get that, so A2 must be 1/3. But that's not the case, right? It's not true that this is equal to 1/3, because what is A2? A2 is the number in front of x squared. The number in front of x squared, in this case, is 0. So A2 is 0. All right, so basically what you can think of is that this formula right here, this is a formula for A3n, right? Because remember, what is the number that goes with x to the 3n? It's A3n.